appreciate the invitation tonight. My name is Joe Hillis. I actually live in Fort Worth, Texas, so I'm not going home tonight either way. So a little bit about me. I'll stand back here because I really don't like looking at pictures of me. I came actually from the emergency services. I spent 25 years in fire and EMS, law enforcement. But if you know anything about the fire department, you know that I worked one day on and had 2 days off in between. So my full-time job at the fire station was 110 days a year. So I had enough time to work another job. Got into IT in the late 80s and spent the last 20 years of my career working as an IT manager for the community that I worked for the fire service. So in 2004, I figured, well, my kids were getting ready to go to college, so it was time for me to go get a real job, and I jumped from the government side and went to the private sector. And so that's where I got my years of experience in enterprise IT. So a little bit about why we're here. I mean, my expertise is in the Microsoft stack. I've been consulting, I guess, for small towns and small business and even some large enterprise for the last several years. So I don't claim to know it all, but kind of like Dave, we can figure it out somehow. Why are we here? If you hadn't figured out or you hadn't heard, I'm not sure how this was billed, but we're on a 26-city road show, and it's a disaster preparedness road show. And the reason that we're here is because this organization that we co-founded a few years ago, we found there was a need in the community for IT professionals to help in disaster. A lot of small communities, a lot of small businesses, folks like that. Katrina was kind of the driver for that. You hear the word Katrina. I've been saying the word Katrina for the last several days or several weeks. I guess this is our third week on the road. And so Katrina was kind of where everything went wrong. And so I guess in a way we're trying to, there was a lot of lessons learned because of Katrina. But one of the things that, we learned was that, the federal government is out there, FEMA is out there, and they're not necessarily really making their services available. The services aren't available. I think FEMA's taken a bad rap. This isn't necessarily a bash FEMA, just to set the record straight on what FEMA is really there for. They're not really there to help small businesses or even large businesses recover in disaster. They're there just to help the community itself, the community as a whole recover. They're there to support the community in their recovery. So the problem is that with the small business side and with the community side, help will ultimately be available through SBA loans. But unfortunately, a lot of the people we've talked to, it took them 6-8 months to get a loan from the SBA. Most small businesses obviously are living hand to mouth, so they've only got 2 weeks tops before they can't miss too many paychecks waiting for that loan from the Small Business Administration. So effectively, that's kind of was one of the big drivers for why our organization got established, because there's just nobody out there to help the little guy. Remember that all disasters are considered local. And what does that mean? It just means that if something were to happen today in this community, it's not a FEMA disaster, it's not a state of North Carolina disaster, it's a local disaster. It's up to your local community to provide the resources for no matter what it is. If it's for sick people, if it's for housing people, if it's for feeding people, this is really up to the local community to provide that. Now, we know that most communities, particularly the small ones, can't provide that, and so that's why they have the escalation path. They can go to the county and they can request assistance, and then they can go to the state and request assistance. And it's a progressive thing until it gets to the federal level. But still, all disasters are considered local, so keep that in mind when you're thinking about what happened. In 2001, after the 9/11 attacks, the big companies, the Intels, the Microsofts, the Ciscos, they all pledged millions of dollars to help with the recovery. And what they quickly found out was that there was no clearinghouse to take their money and put it to good use. So everybody kind of did their own thing. I think Microsoft sent several people up there with their own resources to do their own thing. They reached out to whoever they could reach out to. I think Cisco did the same thing. I think Intel just wrote a few checks to some nonprofits. There was no clearinghouse for that. And there was actually quite a bit of study done after that to say, hey, how can we make this process work better? But this Senator Wyden out of Oregon apparently knew somebody up in one of those companies, and he said, hey, why don't we start this national guard of technology people? And that way they can all help in disaster. Much like the CERT thing. You guys familiar with the CERT, the Citizen Emergency Response Team? So Biden presented that to Congress, and Congress said, yeah, I think that's a good idea. Why don't we just make this part of this brand new Department of Homeland Security that we're going to create? He said, okay. So if you notice, this was in 2001. Well, in 2008, it still hadn't happened. So the Department of Homeland Security actually wanted to confirm a new administrator, and Wyden basically withheld Senate support until they funded his NetGuard program. And unfortunately, the NetGuard program, they did a 4-city pilot program. They gave them, $80,000, and they said, hey, what should you take your best stab at coming up with a community knowledge guard? And it never got off the ground. There's not been a word written about it since. So there was a group that I was involved with, just a group of IT people and people from the emergency management community, that we had been watching this for many, many years. And we decided, in late 2008 that it was time, that it wasn't going to really happen, so we should venture out on our own and try to do it ourselves. So the idea was born. Then there was the Information Technology Disaster Resource Center. Incorporated in January of 2009. We got our 501c3 in May of 2009. Started with a board of 5 and just a handful of volunteers in the Texas area. Flash forward, I guess, we have over 100 resources now throughout the country. We're still building it. That's kind of our initiatives. We're working on those, and I'll show you those in a little bit. But our big thing is that our services are provided at no cost. And one of the problems with what we've seen is we're not trying to take money out of anybody's pockets. Everybody that's a member of our organization works in IT somewhere. Some people work for help desk. Some people work in infrastructure. Some people work for large enterprises. Some people are one-man shops. So the whole idea is that if we can all band together, then we can make it much easier for communities to recover from disaster, which is a big thing. So our mission is to prepare and assist communities with continuity and recovery of information systems affected by disaster. We fulfill the mission through education, planning, and disaster response by a team of dedicated IT professionals and corporate sponsors. Now, I've said this before, that when people say, well, the first question people would ask is, how are you guys funded? That's a good question, but we're funded from a lot of different ways. A lot of private donations, a lot of corporate donations, and reimbursements in some cases from the local and federal government for the disasters that we've been called to on their behalf. But our vision was, and still is, and most decisions that we make are all based on, which is that we're a nationwide organization of IT professionals from all disciplines who volunteer their time and expertise to help communities and small businesses continue operations in time of disaster. You guys can read that. But again, we want to have subject matter experts in advance of a disaster be available to give these people guidance. That's what we're doing now. We're on our 26-city road tour, and we're going through and we're giving them advice on these are the things that you need to plan on to be able to recover your operation following a disaster. We do our best to remain product and vendor agnostic. We just want to throw out what the best practices are. Now, we all have our favorites, and it's kind of funny because if you ask one of our volunteers from the West Coast, hey, how would what do you recommend as a small business backup? And you ask somebody on the East Coast, chances are you're going to get 2 different recommendations. But what we hope is universal is the methodology to do it. That's what we hope is the common thread for our organization. But basically, upon notification of a local, state, or federally declared disaster, we will deploy assets into a region. So I was in North Carolina last year for Hurricane Irene. We did 7 disaster responses last year, regional disaster responses. We've already done 7 in the first quarter of this year. So a little bit about what we believe. We understand current information technologies and the industry best practices. There's no way that I know them all, that I understand them all. I mean, I've worked in the business for 20 plus years, but I know that if I don't know them, I know somebody in this group does, or somebody in our organization knows that. So we feel like we have pretty much all, just like your organization, we feel like we have, most technology disciplines covered. We also recruit and maintain a qualified force of IT professionals. And one of the things that we hope out of this is that you'll see something that you like in our organization, and you'll consider joining us. And we know that you've got a full-time job, and we know that you can't just drop what you're doing to come off on a disaster. But also know that a disaster is not over in a week. When the TV cameras go away, that's just when a disaster is getting cranked up. So our organization is still operating in Joplin right now. There's not a week that goes by that I don't get a phone call from somebody in Joplin at a church where we've got a server and several workstations and a whole inventory system that we're managing for them remotely. So certainly somewhere in the next year, you guys will probably have a week, a weekend, or something like that to go volunteer somewhere in a disaster. We maintain strategic partnerships with leading technology providers. Obviously some of the bigger names in technology. We try to keep them on speed dial, and they support us in a lot of different ways. So, part of what our mission is for this year, part of what we're after this year is to better those relationships, deepen them, and expand them with different folks. We do maintain a cache of rapidly deployable assets for disaster response. In addition to this bus that we have outside, we also have a 48-foot semi-trailer, which was donated by a company out of Michigan. We have all kinds of equipment which has been donated to us, which we try to ready and we keep available that we can, give to a church to go, give to a volunteer center, give it to a small business, something to keep them going after a disaster. We also identify potential hazard areas and pre-plan response recovery scenarios. I think that's part of what we've done on this trip is, we've looked for, places in the event of a disaster. Take Mobile, Alabama was one of the places we were at. We know of places that we will go and set up operations in that area in the event that there's a disaster. So we constantly have people in our organization who are, pre-planning these things. Provide expert IT guidance to small businesses. I think we feel like we have that covered, and we feel like we do a good job with that. We build alliances with emergency management disaster response agencies. Not one of these cities that we've gone to in this 3 weeks. I think we've talked to most all the emergency management agencies along the way. Traded business cards. The time to be trading business cards is not in a disaster, it's in advance of a disaster. The problem is a lot of people don't want to do planning in advance of a disaster. One of our biggest goals was to implement small business recovery centers. We'd hoped that in a disaster, and we still hope that in a disaster, we could come into a room like this, and we can set up workstations, we can set up voice telephone, we can set up a satellite connection somewhere, and we can let these smaller businesses, the 1 and the 2 and the 3-person businesses, come in and spend some time working in this, in a room like this, that can be there for 6 months or more. And we would provide them with whatever it is that they need to get up and going. As these people settle their insurance claims, or they get their small business loans, or things like that, then they can start peeling out of here. That's one of our goals, is to be able to set up these recovery centers and let them stay there in disaster. One of the big things that we found once we got into this, when we first started this out, we were looking to help the small businesses, but what we rapidly found out is it was the communities, it was the emergency management, it was the Red Cross, it was the churches, it was those folks that were serving the public were the ones that were really needing the help. So what we did was we I guess, educated ourselves a little bit more on the process of what these people need in the early end of a disaster. And so we do, we have an agreement with one of our partners that provides us with satellite connections. And so when there's a disaster management, when there's a point of distribution or a church that may be taking care of commodities or whatever for the community, we'll actually go in and set up a connection, set up a server, workstations, database type things for them to track what they're doing, and we'll leave it with them. So what we found out is in disaster is that people will go from church to church to church and get for whatever free they can get. And so the way the communities responded is that now they're all using common databases where when you get there, you have to identify yourself. They look you up and make sure that you're not double dipping. Distribute in-kind technology donations. We do that fairly regularly. When we were in Joplin, for example, we hosted a computer drive. And people came and brought their donated computers, servers, printers, things like that. We cleaned them up and redistributed them back out to the nonprofits that had lost their stuff. And I don't know if you guys followed the Joplin thing, but Joplin lost a third of their town. I mean, that was a big chunk to them. I mean, it was a huge chunk. It wasn't like, some of the other smaller disasters we've been, but it was a swath right to the middle of their town. 500 small businesses were impacted by that. So it was not a small disaster, and it was an EF5 tornado, and so that was the kind that rolls up the grass, takes the grass off the ground. The other thing that we do is just provide clearinghouse services for corporate and in-kind donations. So we just had, for example, I think it was 5 pallets of monitors donated to us. And obviously it's a write-off for the donor form, but in the same breath, I mean, this is something where we'll make sure that this equipment gets distributed to people who are really, truly in need. So some of the places we went in 2011, Joplin obviously was a big place. Like I said, we're still operating there. We've been to Oklahoma, been to northern Alabama, the wildfires in Texas. 7 regional disasters last year. When there is a large event, if you will, we'll stand up an emergency operations center or a quasi-emergency operations center. A lot of times we do it virtually. It just depends on who happens to be available to do it at the time. But we'll monitor that, and whenever we get a report of a disaster somewhere, and it could be just a tornado or it could be multiple tornadoes in a part of the country, we'll monitor that. We'll monitor social media. We'll make phone calls. I mean, we try to get in touch. Have you guys ever heard of the Waffle House method? Waffle House is kind of one of the four, what would you say? I guess they're more on the leading edge of disaster response, if you will, or disaster recovery from a business continuity thing. But for those of you that haven't heard of it, people will call a Waffle House in a disaster and say, what's on the menu? And if they say, well, we're only serving, was it toast or something like that, if they have a limited menu that tells you that the water's down or the electricity is down in the area so that they know that the area has been impacted. I would admit that if those many facilities are down, the chances are they're not answering the phone. But basically, if they have a full menu, then that's what FEMA uses as kind of one of their indicators to say that maybe it's not as bad there as reported. But we do our due diligence to find out, how many folks have been impacted by this disaster and whether it warrants a response. Some of the things that we do, I think we kind of talked about that, but technology asset and donation management. Sometimes, people may bring, like the Homeland Security in this top picture on the left, I think they brought us 200 or 300 little Nextel Direct Connect phones that needed to be distributed. So obviously we inventory those, we assign them out, we do the bookkeeping for that. Just some things that we can do for the local emergency management to free them up. We'll provide connectivity. I think I told you we have partnerships with folks that will help us provide connectivity to communities. We carry quite a bit of, I say quite a bit, I think we carry 25 computers, thin clients, workstations on our bus. So we'll walk in somewhere and roll off a temporary call center for somebody, or a data entry type place, a volunteer reception center, or something like that. We provide mobile workspace, and you guys are welcome to walk through that after the event or on the break today. And we'll do PC and server repair. Now, a lot of our folks are involved in emergency management, so this incident command system we may maintain the communications records for their daily situational report, and provide just regular voice and data communications support. As I said, we have a 39-foot command bus. We have 5 fixed workstations on it, 2 servers. Actually 5 servers on it now. We have 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi, and satellite on it. One of our partners happens to be, in the Wi-Fi business, and so they provide us with, free connectivity for all of our, as long as we're inside their service area. UHF and VHF public safety radios are the things that we found that when we respond to a disaster, that a lot of times the emergency management, the local police, fire, folks will need to come, they'll need our workspace, and so we've got radios in there for them to use. We carry a PBX on there. It certainly comes in handy, and we've deployed it several times. And then we also have a generator on there. So our disaster operations trailer is currently being rebuilt or refurbished, and so we're anxious for that to come back out, but that's something also that we can bring into a disaster for more of a long-term solution. Some of the things that we carry with us, workstations, notebooks, laser printers, PBX, Trixbox, wireless, just mostly networking equipment. A lot of the stuff that we have are things that we can peel off and give to somebody, and never worry about getting it back. I mean, we do take in a fair number of donations of like the Linksys or the Netgear type wireless stuff, things that we're happy to share with other people. We keep about, 5,000 feet of cabling on there. Some of the folks that volunteer with us, obviously we do different things, work with different technologies. We have different folks with different skill sets, as we said. This is actually from back in October, but this is kind of where we have a presence with our volunteers. You can see they're all kind of clumped up and clustered up in the center of the country. So we hope through this trip, we know that we've taken on several. I think there were 3 or 4 that joined last week, and probably as a result of our road show, which we're tickled to death with. But so we're starting to get some more presence along the coast. Outreach and public education is a big thing. I mean, I feel like what I'm up here telling you today is really just about our organization. But what I know about your organization is you guys are already doing this stuff. And that's why I'm so honored to be here tonight, is because, the reason that I even made contact with your organization was because I found something that you guys had published about the good work that you're doing. So I applaud you guys for what you're doing. My guess is that we're going to learn a lot from you guys somewhere along the way. But this is our stab and our attempt at doing it, from our organization. Just some stuff on the street. We got a good, so far everything has been positive. I'm not aware of any negative, which is always important in the nonprofit world. Probably should have pulled that from me. So some of our initiatives for this year is, to improve our disaster and expand our disaster response program. Obviously, we're members of what they call Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster, or VOADs as they're called. Each state has them. There's a national VOAD as well. So there's also regional VOADs. I think I was talking to somebody earlier, and I'm not sure how many. You may have 3 regional VOADs here in North Carolina. I'm not sure. I know in Texas that I think there are 6, and we're members of 4 of the 6 of them. And then after our, through our trip along the coast, I think we'll be more active now with Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi. Those are some connections that we've made on this trip alone. Obviously, we want to increase our technology volunteer capacity. There are, we have, through Volunteer Match, we have 3 or 4 of the volunteer sites, we have things listed on there. And so We do get a lot of interest in those things. It's just one thing to get the interest, but it's another thing to convert them into active volunteers. My guess is the fact that you guys are all here tonight. That says that you're very active in your community. So we hope to match you at some point. And increase our available technology assets. One of the things that we do now, all of our assets are stored in Texas, and so obviously it takes time for us to move them around the country. Our preparedness program, we obviously wanted to increase our community small business outreach, and that seems to be, we've been successful with that, or at least we feel like we've been successful with that. There's a disaster preparedness registry that we have a working committee that's working on a software piece, and it'll be just a hosted application where people, small businesses, nonprofits, if they wish, can come and they can register on that for themselves. And basically, it would be just a secure portal where they can store their own information about their own disaster response plans and things like that. Nothing that we would control other than just, making sure that it was safe and secure. So we hope that will be ready. I've seen the framework of it. It looks like it's going to be a decent little application, but we've got a little ways before we're ready to make that public. And then the Spring IT Disaster Preparedness Roadshow, which almost didn't happen this year. In our planning, particularly in our history over the last couple of years, we've always planned on having 6 months off. Basically October, November through April, which is the storm season. And so, I think we had, through our own procrastination, we had, planned on having the first quarter of this year to plan for this show. We weren't expecting to have a tornado response in January, and in February, and in March, and in April, which is what we've had already this year. So we weren't planning on that. And then administrative-wise, obviously we want to increase our sponsorship and our strategic partnerships, and hopefully add a full-time head. Funding-wise, some of the things, people always ask us, what is it you need? What are you looking for? Well, this is, our biggest expenses really are all around the disaster response program. We've got a great partner. We've got several great partners, but our greatest partner right now is Storagecraft, and it's a shameless plug for them, but they're the ones who are actually funding our tour, or a major funder for our tour that we're doing, this disaster preparedness tour. It's a hand-in-hand marriage as far as I'm concerned, because it's, they have rock star stuff, but B, it's more of, they took the initiative to support, the initiative that we're doing. They had the confidence to support what we're doing and take a leap of faith with us. So we appreciate that. They're with us tonight. I think they're going to do a little quick infomercial, after the break, and then we'll come back and talk some more. Volunteer equipment, like we talked about, that was a big thing. Obviously we'd like to get some good big campaigns underway, and see if we can't, rapidly scale. We had a very controlled growth for the first couple of years. There were certain people, we wouldn't call certain people, we wouldn't talk to certain people because we were afraid if word got out, and we couldn't deliver. We wanted to make sure that we were ready for that. So we think we're in a much better place now. We're ready for those tougher questions. In our disaster preparedness program, we have, for the last couple of years, I guess, we've gone to different parts, different regions of the country, and we've given a similar program as far as that goes. So we're hoping to increase the funding for that, and those are the things that we're working on grants to make those things happen. And then office and warehouse is a big thing for us. So far, we've had a lot of that space donated. Most everything we do is donated as a nonprofit, and that's one of the things that I really like about being in the nonprofit world is you can feel good about asking people for things. I can tell you that of our 26 cities on this tour, all of our venues have been donated to us, and we're in nice places. We're in the New Orleans Museum of Art, and we're at the big Sheraton Hotel. So a lot of folks have donated that, and they've donated over half of the hotel rooms for us on this trip. So we're really lucky that people have responded so well to us on this. And that's the same thing with our fleet maintenance. All of our fleet maintenance is donated on all our vehicles. We've got some great partners that really take good care of us. Some of our equipment needs, This was on our list for last year, was satellite service. We've since gotten that addressed. Notebooks, you're always needing those. We'll never have enough because, either they break or you hand them out or they're just time to life cycle either way. Monitors was another thing. Like I told you, we just got a whole bunch, pallets of monitors donated to us. But one of our big things, I guess, we're going after this year is for these regional response trailers. There's 24 to 30-foot trailers that we can, post or stage. And, this would probably be a part of the country we would want to stage one in. The Heartland is another place, some other places up in the Northwest that we'd like to also stage them in. So we're working towards getting some more of those this year. Desktops, we say desktops because, we've seen laptops walk away. So desktops, they seem to last a little bit longer. Just wireless equipment, just regular consumer-grade equipment, which is what we normally put out there because that's normally the folks that we're dealing with. So I think my time is up for this session.